The Shema prayer is considered to be the central declaration of faith in Judaism. It is the focal point of the daily morning and evening prayers. The Shema consists of three separate passages taken from the Torah: Deuteronomy 6 verses 4 through 9, Deuteronomy 11 verses 13 through 21, and Numbers 15 verses 37 through 41. Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9 begins with the words, "Hear, O Israel," or in Hebrew, Shema Yisrael. This is where the prayer gets its name, Shema, or hear. In this context, the word Shema connotes listening with the intent of doing. Listen to what I'm about to tell you and then do it. The sister passage of Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9, the second passage of the Shema, is Deuteronomy 11 verses 13 through 21, which is found in this week's Torah portion, Torah Ekev, which means as a result of or because. This portion spans 5 chapters, from Deuteronomy 7 and verse 12 through chapter 11 and verse 25. Deuteronomy 11, 13 through 21 is the sister passage of Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9, because they seem to say the same thing, especially 6 through 9 and 11, 18 through 20. They both sound very familiar. I'll read them for you here. Deuteronomy 6, 6 through 9 says, "These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down and rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." And Deuteronomy 11, 18 through 20 says, "You shall therefore impress these words of mine on your heart and on your soul, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall teach them to your sons, talking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." So what's the deal here? Is this just a reiteration for emphasis? Well, this is why it's handy to know Hebrew, even just a little bit of Hebrew, or to have access to a good commentary that examines the Hebrew of a passage. Working in the original languages of the Bible will many times provide insights that are lost in English translations. In Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9, all of the yous are singular yous, as in talking to one person. You love the Lord with all your heart. You, Michael, love the Lord with all your heart. You keep the commandments on your heart, or keep the commandments on your heart, Michael, the individual person. Teach them to your children, Michael. Teach them, you as an individual person. Now, however, in Deuteronomy 11, verses 13 through 21, many of the yous are plural yous, as in talking to a group of people, talking to the entire community of Israel. And this is the passage that I want to briefly go over today. Let's start in Deuteronomy chapter 11, and we'll go down to verse 13. And maybe I'll say y'all, since we are here in Texas. "It shall come about, if y'all listen obediently to my commandments, which I am commanding y'all today, to love the Lord, you all's God, and to serve him with all y'all's heart and with all y'all's soul." So what can these plural yous show us in this verse? Well, again, Moses is addressing the entire nation of Israel together. And they're being commanded together. They're being commanded to listen obediently together. They're being commanded to love God collectively. They're being commanded to serve God wholly as a whole group of people. This emphasizes the fact that Torah observance can only be accomplished in a community. It's meant to be done in a community. Remember the 10 commandments or the 10 words? The first 4 are toward worshiping God, and the rest of them are pointing towards each other and how we're supposed to live together. Let's go down now to verse 14. "That he will give rain for your land in its season." Remember, the land belongs to all the people, so this is still a plural land. "That he will give the rain for y'all's land in its season. The early and the late rain, that you," now we go back to singular, "that you may gather in your grain, your new wine, your oil, He will give grass in your fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. So the rest of the yous in verses 14 and 15 are singular. So we switch back from the plural back into the singular. What can we learn about these singular yous? What are they showing us? Well, the land belongs to all of Israel. So really, the land belongs to God. But the product of the land belong to the person tending the fields and the flocks that are on the land. So when the people work on the land, well, all that they produce belongs to them. And so here we see that ownership is a biblical principle, that whatever they produced, they're able to keep and they're able to have, and that is their property. Sure, we help the poor, and in fact, Israel had to help the widow, the orphan, the sojourner, and the Levite because they didn't have land to do these things. They didn't have land to grow crops. They didn't have land to have cattle and to have herds. So yes, they are supposed to help the poor, but the Apostle Paul says, if you are capable, if you don't work, you don't eat. So the capable person needs to work, or they're not going to eat. They're not going to be given freely. This is 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 10. So ownership is a good thing, and ownership is something that we should be striving for. It's a good thing for us to produce things. It's a good thing for us to have things, to have assets, to have things that belong to us. The Bible does not teach socialism. Some people would point at the end of Acts 2, and they would say, you see, this is a form of socialism, but that's a discussion for another time. We'll cover that at another time. Well, all I want to say about this is the Bible teaches that ownership is a good thing. In fact, the last couple of commandments in the 10 Commandments is not to steal property from your neighbor, something that they own, not to covet what your neighbor has. Don't look at his possessions and desire them for yourself. Okay, let's go to verse 16. Beware that your, plural, that y'all's hearts are not deceived, and that y'all do not turn away and serve other gods and worship them. So here we see in walking out the word together, they'll keep each other balanced and not going astray. But they have to do it together. They have to collectively be doing this together. Verse 17. Or the anger of the Lord will be kindled against y'all, and he will shut up the heavens so that there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its fruit, and y'all will perish quickly from the good land which the Lord is giving y'all. So if we allow bad worship in the community, we can expect to reap the consequences together. So the people are supposed to keep each other accountable and to keep the bad teachings and bad things out of the community so that they can all get the blessings. And if not, they will all reap the consequences of allowing sin in their midst. Verse 18, you shall therefore impress these words of mine on y'all's hearts and on y'all's souls, and you shall bind them as a sign on y'all's hands, and they shall be as frontals on y'all's forehead. The frontals talking about the tefillin, the boxes that have the prayers in them that are worn on the forehead and worn on the arm. And tefillin is synonymous with prayer. So here what we can learn is that laying tefillin together as a community it's synonymous with praying as a group. Praying as a group of people who are worshiping the Lord together with all of their heart and with all of their soul. Verse 19, y'all shall teach them to y'all's sons. So teaching the next generation together, having a desire to help the next generation should be important for everyone. People that don't have children, they can't say, those aren't my kids. Just because there's someone else's children doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility in helping them to learn. We should care for the well-being of other children and for all of the next generation, whether there are children or not. Okay, now we switch back to the singular. Continuing in verse 19. Talking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So now why did we switch back to the singular? What can these singular yous here show us? Well, they're in your house. They're on your gates. It's your activity of walking along the road. You're in your bed when you lie down and when you rise up. So here we are shown that individual and family privacy is a biblical principle. This is your house. This is your dwelling. We don't need to be in everyone's business, and everyone doesn't need to be in your business. Yes, we all need to be in each other's lives, but we don't need everyone knowing all about all that we do. They don't need to be knowing about all of our affairs, and neither should we be knowing about everyone else's affairs. So we need to make sure that everyone has family and individual privacy. There's nothing wrong with having that. Okay, now we switch back to the plural in verse 21. So that y'all's days and the days of y'all's sons may be multiplied on the land which the Lord swore to y'all's father to give them, as long as the heavens remain above the earth. So here we see the nation prospering together because they are all obedient together. So this second part of the Shema, this second passage here in Deuteronomy 11, it's showing us that there is a responsibility on the individual to be involved in a community of faith. In other words, to be part of a church, to be part of a larger group than just an individual, a larger group than just worshiping with your family in your house. We need to be with a community of faith to worship together and for following the commandments so that we can love each other, support each other. Our obedience to God begins at the individual level, but then we are called to be part of a community. It starts as an individual, but then we become part of a community. Our obedience, our relationship with God cannot fully be developed outside of community. Actually, we can demonstrate our love for God by the way we treat others. Yeshua said in Matthew 5:23 through 24, if you are presenting your offering at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First be reconciled with your brother and then come and present your offering. Before you worship God, get right with your brother. Being in community is essential to our faith. Sure, there are times of being away from community when folks move, when you're in transition, when you're looking for a new place, like I am right now. And this is the reason why I'm putting together this podcast and putting together these teachings, because I'm looking for fellowship. I'm looking for either a place for us to worship or creating a place for us to worship with like-minded people. Being outside of a community is not the norm for the people of God. And on the heels of this COVID epidemic and the crazy things that happened there, and churches shut down and people didn't meet and everyone got used to meeting online, that is not normal. We need to be in each other's lives, present in each other's lives, physically in each other's lives, not through internet video chat. So this passage in Deuteronomy is making it clear that God's design for us, for individuals and families, is to be in a community of faith, is to be part of a church, is to be part of a congregation, or however you want to define it. This is where we can love our neighbor as ourselves. We can't do that through the internet. We can't do that through Zoom or Facebook or whatever it is that people are using online. Being in a community is where we can practice the last of the commandments. Remember, the first four are pointing towards God, and the rest of them are pointing towards each other and how we're supposed to live together. Being in a community is where we are tested and where we are stretched and forced to grow. Sometimes we meet people that really push our buttons. But hey, there may be people where we push their buttons. You get into a community sometimes and you think, man, I get enough of all of this strife or whatever at home. Why do I want more of that? Well, it's because God requires that of us. It's easy to be a holy and wise sage up on a mountaintop somewhere in the Himalayas all alone when there's no one to offend or no one to offend you. It's harder to be holy and righteous in a community of imperfect people because you are imperfect as well. You and I, we're all imperfect. We need to be in a community where we get offended or where we offend others, but we need to be in fellowship. It can be messy and dirty, but this is where God wants us, and this is where God will shape us.